Aloha, everybody, and welcome to a very special YouTube Live. I am super excited to talk to Maria and Kristin. We've been friends online for a long time. This is the first time I'm seeing you in person or, face to face, which is really nice. But to me, they're practitioners, but they're experts in everything hormones, which is something that I get a lot of questions on. And it's only been in the past year or two that I've been very, interested in it. I've always been interested, but I think I was kind of down that bad dogma of, BHRT is bad, it causes breast cancer. You want to do natural things, and just learning more and more and more, and getting to that age myself, realizing like, I don't want to have these bad moods. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want my skin to look bad. And realizing, I didn't realize how important estrogen was for our muscles, or not necessarily our muscles, but our bones, our arteries, and all of that. So I asked, all right, well, Maria and Kristin are experts, and they are going to teach us everything. And if you're a man, don't turn away, because, a lot of them are married to women that they all go through this eventually. And, if you have a wife that's suffering with low moods or something, you'd be like, honey, I've listened to this, interview, and I think that it could help you. So welcome, girls. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having us. And thank you for having the humility enough to kind of admit publicly that your understanding has evolved. And I think that's just a sign of I would say in general, just a good person who's willing to learn,
And,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember always watching. Sorry.
I was gonna say, we are that way about a lot of things, nutrition, with ingredients. We learn and evolve based on what I've always said. If I stop learning, just put me in the ground, because life is about learning. So
I know you girls are the keto diet and stuff, but you're also on the protein side with us, where it's just like
100%.
Everybody thinks, it's a moderate protein or lower protein. And anyway,
we're not dogmatic about things. We just follow what works.
But we're going to talk about diet eventually. Yeah. But maybe can we start with this whole idea where I got sucked into these studies showing that BHRT is bad and it's going to cause breast cancer? Could we start with like the false information they sent us and why those studies were not good?
Yeah, for sure. So what most people are, when they hear the tidbits about, estrogen causes cancer or hormones are dangerous, it's really all stemming from a singular study, which is the Women's Hormone Initiative or Health Initiative, that was started in the late 90s and ran briefly until the early 2000s, until it was cut off prematurely because there were incidences of cancer and some stroke and whatnot that came out of it. And so, unfortunately, dogma from scientific studies takes about 17 years to get into circulation, which means that, if we look back, it's only 2024. It's really only been about 20 years since the study was stopped, which all of our doctors in circulation were taught the dogma from this study. So that's part of the reason why it's so entrenched in kind of everyone's belief system. But essentially what this study was is no one wants to talk about that in the early 1900s, hormone replacement or hormone restoration, as it was actually referred to then, was seen as disease protective. It was to prevent women from getting the diseases of aging. And every medical society signed off on it. So in the early 1900s, this was standard of care to provide women hormones to replace what was being lost through living longer. And then women were thriving. Obviously, there are some profit things that get involved in the story, which is when we were using extracts of hormones. We need to scale those, enter big pharmaceutical companies. They figure out that they can make things that look like hormones that are actually synthetics, and they can patent those. And then they can get them into mass circulation and line their pockets. So we had this shift from what was originally a practice of using natural hormones into using synthetic hormones. And that became the standard of care. There started to become some signals within some of the research of some heart issues and different things that were developing. And so understandably, the FDA and different societies in the United States said, we need more studies. We need to figure out if these hormones are causing these problems or what's going on. And so ultimately, they cashed in on sort of this, and I don't mean this in a pejoratively, but there was a big emancipation for women in the 60s and 70s, right? We were starting to not be tethered to the home as the way they like to pitch it. And, women are working longer. They don't necessarily want to have kids right away. They want to kind of put off some of these things. And so they said, well, let's study what's going on in the context of looking at women's health. There was a ton of money behind, we're going to get on this feminist bandwagon and we're going to look at women's health. And so that was where the funding came from. And then the study gets underway, and, there were some bad outcomes. And so they concluded hormones were bad. But now the study researchers have gone back and looked at the parameters of the study and said, well, first of all, who were we studying? We weren't studying women like you, Maria, or me and Maria. We were not studying healthy 40 to 50-year-old women. They were looking at women who were about 60 to 65 years old when the average age of menopause is 51. So we're talking plus 10 years past menopause. They've been hormonally deficient all that time. They were diabetic. Many of them were obese. They were past smokers. None of them were screened for existing cancers. And so essentially they took an incredibly unhealthy population that doesn't represent a perimenopausal or recently menopausal woman. And that was their cohort, okay? Then they used hormones that weren't actually hormones. They were endocrine disruptors. They were synthetic drugs made by the pharmaceutical companies that get close to looking like our hormones, but on a molecular scale are just slightly different. And what those do is they cause endocrine disruption in the tissues of the body. And so things started to go awry. And these women, unhealthy women, given these wrong hormones, were then also given them in a manner in which we increase clotting factors, risks of strokes, etc., because they were swallowing the hormones. We now know we should never swallow our main hormone of estradiol. So we have the wrong women, the wrong drugs, and the wrong route of administration, and voila, we have all these problems. And one of our mentors likes to say, it's sort of like looking at children who eat raspberry flavored candy and saying all raspberries are bad. Right? And that's what they did, is they said, don't eat raspberries, they're unhealthy. Don't take hormones, they're unhealthy. And it's like, wait a minute, you weren't actually giving them hormones, you were giving them drugs. You weren't working with women who were recently perimenopausal and menopausal, and you applied that all in the wrong way. So now even the researchers themselves have completely disavowed the conclusions of the study. But because we have this huge lag in medicine, we still get the study results repeated. And it's shocking to me and Maria, because we thought, there's so much more awareness and evolution and critical thinking, especially after the last few years. And yet we cannot drown out that drumbeat that hormones cause cancer and hormones are bad.
This is one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this. And you two are the experts on hormones. And my sister, she's quite a bit older than I am, and she's just dealing with a couple different things. And I was like, go talk to your doctor about this. And her doctor, Jackie's like, no, you're not doing them. And I was like, dude, like, how? I understand doctors are busy, but how can we not stay on top of the facts? And as women, we're living most of our lives almost in that menopausal area. Why don't we deserve to feel amazing, have good moods, and not die of heart disease? I had no idea how important estrogen was. I was aware that there's 3 different types. And like you were talking about, the synthetic and whatnot, but could you tell us more about why we should care when our hormones do tank?
Well, Maria, what happens is a lot of women start caring when they have symptoms. And so your most common symptoms are hot flashes. Kristin and I never had hot flashes, right? And, maybe another symptom that starts to get women's awareness, if they can connect this, would be like vaginal dryness. That's fairly common as well. And, no one should have to live with symptoms. So we're not telling women not to be concerned with those, but it's really why we need to care is the stuff we don't see.
Feel.
Right. And so that's going to be like, no one feels osteoporosis. No one feels the lack of regeneration on the endothelial lining of their blood vessels. No one really particularly feels the reduction in nitric oxide. No one feels the kind of tau protein deposition in the brain. Okay, but and by the time we maybe feel some of the effects of that, we are probably north of 60. And, can we do HRT then? In majority of cases, the answer is yes. But you will not get as much benefit. You will get benefit. You get the most benefit when you start at around menopause. And for many women, I mean, we have women, you know, it's so individual. We have women who are starting, you know, in perimenopause, you know, things are just starting to feel off. Some of them are 41, 42. I know Kristin and I would say we started 49, 50, about that. We both wish, like looking back in reverse, that we started approximately age 45, maybe younger.
Younger for me.
I started early.
Yeah.
I started early. Like I just had some signs that I was like, I don't feel right. And that's another thing I want to touch on. Maybe we should be getting our symptoms or our levels tested maybe when we're in our 20s, so we know what our baseline is, because 100%. I don't know what that was. Mm-hmm. But
when do we feel our best, right? Like I felt amazing at 30, 35. You know, things really started to shift at about 43. And, you know, what if I had my kind of peak estrogen expression at 33 or 35, and let's just say maybe I tested every year or even every other year in my 30s, right? And, you know, this is why we're so passionate about bringing this message forth, because we can't go back. But yes, that is a very, very cogent point, that we would kind of know what's our level when we feel our best, right? And
well,
then
okay, I don't want to forget what I'm saying. Like, okay. I actually tested my hormones and they were in this normal range, but he said, but you have this sex binding globulin protein thing.
Sex
that's
kind of globulin. Yep.
Yeah, he's like, that's making it look normal, but you don't feel normal because of this. And so we had to kind of address that. And once we did, wow, I just felt so much better, and I started to build muscle again.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is Maria touched on, like, oh, sorry, what?
Someone's asking if they are 60, are they too old? Are you ever too old to start?
Old.
Okay, yeah, I just want to.
And I also want to say, should you ever go off?
No.
I don't think so either.
No. Yeah. No, but I was going to touch on one thing for the younger ladies from the standpoint of, I mean, Maria and Craig, you're in a busy time of life with the boys, right? So there's a lot of things, like you can get brain fog, you know, you feel like your sleep gets disrupted, stress is higher, etc. And the sad thing is that's typical for most women in their early 40s, mid 40s, is, you know, whether it's careers, partners, kids, parents who need us, whatever. We have a lot of demands on our lives as women at that point. And we are caretakers. Let's face it, no matter what our status is in life, we're, you know, born to be caretakers. And so a lot of these things, for me, it was like, I couldn't get through the day without a list for my lists, like literally had multiple lists. And I'm a really high functioning person. And so I was like, I felt like I was losing myself. Right. And, you know, our mood changes, our libido changes, things that we attribute to sort of this time of life, meaning raising kids, taking care of spouses, you know, helping parents, etc. But the sad thing is, those are all signs of hormone loss as well. And so I think for a lot of women, we sort of gaslight ourselves until the symptoms are so palpable, we have no other excuse for them. And then we go, oh, it's my hormones. The problem is all those vascular changes that Maria just talked about, they started in our early 40s. Right? Even before we got our first hot flash. So those are the things that why we get really passionate about it, is because the focus in the United States in particular, and I think it's this way and now in the UK as well, is like symptoms are what we go off of. No need to test, only symptoms. And as you just pointed out, I mean, testing, we could look at estradiol, but if we don't look at sex hormone binding globulin, you're going to be told that it's normal. And so these are the problems, is we need better testing, earlier testing. You know, we need to educate women that, gosh, if you start to feel your world kind of shakes a bit, that might be your sign. It doesn't have to be a dry vagina.
Well, you're so right when it comes to that. I mean, I just wanted to kind of be really open with everybody here. I noticed something wasn't right because I'm a very adventurous person. I love to explore and go out on my paddleboard and do all these things and just explore all the time. I didn't want to do that anymore. I was like, I didn't have the drive to. I just wasn't myself anymore. And I was like, something's off.
Isolationism. That's a big symptom of basically hormones are on the decline or the deficient or they're not optimal. It's just like, we don't want to engage in society. We're just content to stay at home. And I'm definitely a homebody. I love my home, But I also, noticed that, I noticed a period of time where like I didn't care to go out with friends or anything like that. So don't mistake that for just being a homebody, because
right. No, I'm an introvert, but it was my passion for life and exploring, and I do a lot of exploring by myself, but I didn't want to do that. But I feel much better.
Yeah. And a lot of women will develop anxiety and never have been an anxious person in the past. And that's another sign that we want to tell women, like, even if you had anxiety when you were younger, it might get worse as these hormones start to decline. Or if you were someone who never had anxiety, suddenly it kicks in. And I think that, kind of feeds the isolationism, even if the isolation wasn't kind of a natural occurrence, because it's embarrassing to talk about those things in our 40s, right? I mean, we're supposed to kind of have figured it all out by now. Right. And I mean, I don't want to go back to my 20s and 30s. Let's be honest. We're all kind of posing and trying to figure that stuff out. But you hit 40, especially mid 40s, and you're like, I got my life. I know who I am. I feel good about these things, or, things are clicking around. And then all of a sudden the world starts to kind of shake a bit. And it's kind of, destabilizing to have to come out and say, I don't feel right. Something's happening to me. But on the outside, you look perfectly fine.
But extreme stress can shift somebody into this low hormones, and
exactly.
There's been a lot of stress, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But that anxiety is usually low progesterone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or
so,
you might wake up at
most women are right. That's the sleep disruption is a huge thing, because both estrogen and progesterone actually improve sleep architecture and sleep onset. A lot of women are just told you just need progesterone. Right. But the reality is that for some women, like you just pointed out, estradiol can be tanked because of high stress. Estradiol can be tanked with under eating. Estradiol can be tanked with over exercising, which, let's face it, body composition changes creep into this phase of life. And a lot of people think, well, now I have to double down on eating less and moving more. Right. And so they'll actually exacerbate the hormone decline that was leading to the body composition changes to begin with. And as a woman, you start to feel, I don't know what to do right anymore, right? Like I thought I understood these things, and now nothing is working. And you just see a lot of women lean into, unfortunately, whether it's the isolationism, or you start to see women start to drinking more. There's all these sorts of habits that we kind of adopt in order to address these things, because no one's bothering to say your hormones might be low.
Yeah. So
should we address Linda's comment? Linda's comment just came up. Can we address that?
Yeah. I just want to throw that up back up there real quick.
People also want to know, Maria is someone missed your name. So it's Maria and Kristin and Craig.
Yeah.
And we'll have your information linked below if people want to contact you for more help.
Sure.
Definitely.
It just breaks my heart when I say that. It absolutely breaks my heart.
Exactly.
I'm going to assume that at 42, and she was put into surgical menopause, it sounds as though she was not put on HRT. Women that get put into surgical menopause need to literally be leaving the hospital with the prescription for estradiol and progesterone, like before they get off the operating table, type of a thing.
So I was going to ask you about hysterectomies and how, I know people in my family that have had them and never were addressed with hormones. Could you talk about if they kept their ovaries or not, and if that changes the? Sure.
So if your ovaries come out, you are literally like menopausal the moment they take the ovaries out. We still have a little bit of estrone coming from adrenal, androgens, but that's really not enough. It's not enough. And so, however, though, if you have a hysterectomy and you keep your ovaries in, as a lot of women do, you still might go into a bit of earlier menopause, because it's anecdotal, but, in medicine we'll say, oh no, nothing's changed. But, you can speak to dozens, if not hundreds of women who had some type of gynecologic surgery and they just went into menopause perhaps a little bit earlier. Absolutely.
Well, and you lose the blood flow. There is a change in blood flow, and a lot of women are told, like, well, we'll leave your ovaries, we'll take your fallopian tubes and your uterus. And the reality is that you're completely changing the whole system down there, right? So there's going to be kind of a hastening of the decline in hormone production, even if you keep your ovaries. Yeah.
So another quick one. There's actually a couple questions related to this, so I'll pop them up real quick here. One is, is there a test to do for all of this? And then also there was if your doctor is open to it, what should we be asking for?
Well, we on a kind of macro level, we typically start with estradiol and progesterone. There's several ways to do estradiol. Transdermal has the most data and is therefore considered the safest. And then progesterone, is typically used orally. Some women can use cream, and they do, and they're fine. We think it's really, bioidentical, I now say is baseline. Like for the most part, that is largely what is being given out to women right now is bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. You're just got your foot in the door at that point. Like that's a good thing, but there's a lot more to be considered. Are you going to be kept? So this is a concern Kristin and I have. Are you going to be kept into this, as I say, 51-year-old woman just went into menopause a year ago. Are you going to be kept at this very low kind of late stage perimenopausal state with like a really low dose patch because your doctor is, willing, but still fearful?
Scared.
Yeah. Are you going to be kept at a picogram level of 30? That's really low. I mean, so, what do you have an idea of what your level is going to be, what you want it to be? What do you need to achieve, not just symptom reduction, but, your best protection against the chronic diseases of aging? That's typically a little higher. Well, I'm being a little bit, restrained in what I'm saying because we don't want to give out specific dosing and specific numbers because that's really going to be pretty bio-individual for women. But suffice it to say that, you get in the door, you get some estrogen, you're bioidentical baseline, but you kind of really need to work with a physician who's going to be committed to your health and vitality, not just shutting you up because your hot flashes are gone. So that's where we start.
And for testing, you'll hear some providers say it's impossible to test in perimenopause because things are so variable. Yes and no. If you test, 3 times, let's say, you're going to have a pretty good idea where you're at, even though it's changing. One of the markers that Maria and I really like for women of this whole stage from 40 on up, even the 64-year-old who asked the question, is a marker called follicle stimulating hormone. So it's not a sex hormone, it's a brain hormone, right? It comes from the pituitary, and its job is technically to kind of hasten the ovaries to make their production on a regular monthly cyclic basis of our estradiol. And when estradiol starts to decline, the brain is like, oh, I'm not happy with this. And so it kind of puts the foot on the gas by pouring follicle stimulating hormone into the system to sort of prompt the ovaries, hey, do better, give me more. And so as estradiol starts to go down, you're going to see FSH start to go up. And that's a way for women to say, track both your estradiol and your FSH at the same time. Take 3 readings over a few months. You're going to know once FSH is consistently above 25, it doesn't really matter if you're still cycling, you need hormones. And this is one of the things Maria likes to refer to it as sort of the halo of estrogen, is that, we can still get a little adrenal production, even if the ovaries aren't pumping out eggs and doing all their things. And so we've seen 57-year-old women who are still cycling. That does not mean that they are not in need of hormones. In fact, they are woefully in need of hormones. And we'll see their FSH will be like 80. And they're like, but I'm still cycling. And we're like, the presence of the bleed doesn't necessarily matter because that's likely some adrenal production, maybe a little bit of residual ovarian, maybe a surge every once in a while out of the ovaries. And it's just enough to create a little lining so that then you shed it and you get some bleeding or spotting. That doesn't mean you're having an actual menstrual bleed or that you're not menopausal yet. And that's one of the things that we get really frustrated with is everyone thinks menopause means 12 months without a period. I still have some sort of a period, therefore I'm not in menopause. Those are totally false. Menopause as a 12 months without a period is just a man-made construct to sort of create a baseline. It's not a scientific term. It's not an actual, medical event.
Yeah. Wow, I had no idea. So this time of women's life, they often complain of weight gain. Is there something that causes weight gain in a menopausal or perimenopausal woman?
This is so controversial. And Maria and I we'll die on this hill. And yes, I mean, we will say the answer is yes. And what we do know is that the base metabolic rate of a woman does change as she starts to lose her hormones. We also know that we have estradiol receptors lining almost every tissue in the body, specifically in muscles. So you're going to start to see loss of fast twitch muscles. Women start to lean into endurance sports because that slow twitch is just a more comfortable place to be. They lose their muscle mass, and so the body can get softer, even if the scale's not changing a ton. So you're going to see body composition changes. You're going to see a reduction in carbohydrate handling. The relationship between estradiol and the microbiome is huge. And we know that the microbiome needs kind of a certain milieu in order to process carbohydrates well. We know that we need a certain amount of muscle to sink carbohydrates into. So if we're losing our muscle mass, we're losing our muscle architecture, and we're having a shifting gut microbiome, our ability to handle carbohydrates is de facto reduced as we hit perimenopause and beyond. But what do a lot of women do? We're eating 3 to 5 times, or 5 to 7 times a day. They're leaning into like the oatmeal for breakfast. They're exercising a ton, which is catabolic and cortisol spiking. And so yes, you're going to see the body change. Unfortunately, we have a lot of influencer type doctors entering this space at their 40 years old. God bless them. They have a lot to learn. And they will say, I didn't gain weight. And it's like, sure, but you're also, using testosterone therapy prematurely or using growth hormone. Many of these doctors online are cycling Ozempic. No one wants to actually talk about what they're doing to maintain their body. And so they sort of gaslight the average woman on the street who thinks, I'm sorry, I gained weight and I haven't changed anything. And we're like, yeah, you did. You are gaining weight. It's not in your head.
I became much more insulin resistant. Alcohol really affected me, and caffeine, super, a lot. I could tell exactly when I needed to cut it out.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah. And that's, the more metabolically healthy you are coming into this transition, maybe the less the impact will be on you physically in terms of aesthetic and the scale. But that's not all of us, right? Many of us are coming into our 40s with some element of metabolic derangement. Maybe we've gotten away with good genetics that have allowed us to eat oatmeal for breakfast and, do too many HIIT classes all week long, right? And then it's going to be a bit of a brick wall for a lot of those ladies. And it feels very unfair because they think I haven't changed anything, and yet everything changed.
Yeah. We have a couple questions that we wanted to hit, if you don't mind.
Any supplements that can be taken as well?
That's really bio-individual. I don't know what supplements for what. We do, vitamin E and magnesium can be good for hot flashes. Those are just addressing, again, those obvious symptoms. And again, no one should have to live with miserable symptoms, but Kristin and I try to take people beyond the other things, like the lining of your blood vessels are not repairing. You need estrogen for that. And, love to know the age of this woman asking, or does she want supplements because she's not a candidate for HRT. There are some people that are not candidates. That list is pretty small.
Can you mention them, those things?
Yeah.
Sure, they've got active cancer, or they've got liver disease, or they've got undiagnosed uterine bleeding, or probably Lynch syndrome would be, ruling.
Well, and DVT. So if they've got active clotting disorder, that will definitely be a problem. However, if it's a clotting disorder that is stabilized, often transdermal estrogen actually can improve your risk of having a clot, notwithstanding having the genetics for a clotting disorder. So like Maria said, it's a much smaller list than most doctors are willing to admit, because they just think that, anyone with just any random metabolic history is not a candidate. And the hard thing is like the 64-year-olds, if you've had a long-term history of insulin resistance and maybe obesity, and maybe you've got established arterial plaque, you're not a candidate, but we need to, 1, really double down on the nutrition and lifestyle pieces. And then 2, we need to just proceed cautiously. So usually there's going to be some imaging that gets done. You might be at lower doses than the other woman, but you're still going to get some benefits. As Maria said, it's not going to necessarily reverse the things that might have happened after 15 years of no hormones, but it can sure as heck prevent you from ending up at 70 with 14 prescription medications. And, so it becomes kind of a cost benefit analysis for the older ladies. But the younger women, truly, unless you are really like acute liver failure, cancer, like Maria said, Lynch and clotting disorders, you're likely still a candidate.
You haven't mentioned testosterone. Well, you did shortly that they're using it too early. Can you touch on testosterone in women?
Yeah, so testosterone's getting a lot of airtime right now. It's super popular. Testosterone, women, we make it in our ovaries and our adrenal glands. So it does fall with age, usually not as quickly as estrogen and progesterone. And there's this huge focus on just like muscle optimization, body recomp, libido. And you've got like women in their early 40s who are just like going for the testosterone, and doctors all too eager to fill these prescriptions. They're usually what Kristin and I somewhat refer to, not in a loving way, as like drive-by clinics. Like they're not interested in health optimization, but you got a woman who doesn't want to have sex and then is all over her husband like every single day. They think they take that as a win, but it's our belief that if you're that young and you need testosterone, you got to look at your lifestyle, your diet, your protein intake, your weightlifting, your adrenal health, like that. And, because we kind of preach, I wouldn't say caution, but just like this order of events with testosterone, people are like, oh, but is it not good? No, it's great. It's great. But we don't start with that. We start with estradiol and progesterone. And get
too much isn't great either, right?
Oh, too much is terrible.
No. Yeah. And this is the thing, we want to ask some of these doctors. I mean, there's this huge shift to essentially over-andronize women right now. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know if it's because these doctors get a lot of bang for their buck in terms of the women are like, woohoo, I'm 30 years old again, or jumping my husband like a teenager. It's like, that's going to change. And are you advising her on the voice changes, the hair loss, the blood changes? We see it all too often. And it just takes a woman, maybe, Maria, 3-4 cycles of pellets on testosterone for them to suddenly go, oh, you know what? Something is off here. My hair's falling out. All of these things are going sideways. And the sad thing is the voice box changes. It's never coming back. So you're going to get a deeper carriage in your voice. A lot of times the androgenic alopecia is going to be a lifelong kind of battle for you after that. So it's not just that we like estradiol before testosterone. It says that testosterone has ramifications for women. And, there's a belief now of pushing, the predominant hormone in women is testosterone. And that's not exactly true. It needs more nuance. The predominant hormone are androgens, DHEA in particular, but from DHEA comes testosterone. And guess what, ladies? Estradiol comes from testosterone. We need testosterone to make our estradiol. That doesn't mean that testosterone is the one that we need. We can't control if it converts into estradiol or not if we take it too early. What we should take is estradiol. That's what's protecting your bones. That's what's protecting your brain. That's what's protecting your heart. So, we just kind of keep screaming nuance to these doctors who are saying, but testosterone is the predominant female hormone. We're like, well, that's not exactly true. Look at you and Craig. Craig's got a hell of a lot more testosterone than you. And there's a reason. He's a man. You're not. So,
well, I want to hit this question about DHEA, but I also want to touch on, you mentioned pellets. Now, the doctor I first went to, he does pellets. And I said, I don't want to do those. I want to do a cream. How do you feel about pellets versus cream versus injections?
Okay, so with testosterone specifically, pellets.
No, it was a
all kind of forms. So we'll keep it to testosterone for ease of use. Testosterone pellets get women at very, very high levels, and there's a fall off over time. It is a minor surgical procedure. I will never be someone who will downplay someone's lived experience. Okay, I always say to the pellet evangelists, the women who got their first or two pellet, insertions, and they feel amazing. I'm like, just tell me that you still feel amazing after 5 years, because women need an HRT that works, reliably and consistently for life. not because they get a year or two of amazing libido, and then like Kristin said, your hair starts to fall out, or we start to get thick blood because the doses are so high. So yes, and that can happen with testosterone. Like, it's more common in men, but it can happen when the testosterone dose is too high. So I have, truth be told, spoken to women who've been on pellets for 10 years and they're happy. And, God bless you. If it works, that's not going to be the case for the majority of women. So we're not fans of pellets. Nope.
Creams are wonderful. Creams are absolutely wonderful for testosterone. And we're talking like tiny, like the tip of a pen is usually the amount that most women need and take. As for injections, that's a little bit controversial right now because of what happened during COVID and this rise of telemedicine and tech platforms that have become kind of ubiquitous. And now you don't need to go talk to your gynecologist to get hormones. You can just call up, the local telemedicine or Google it. Those outfits are usually administering testosterone injections for women. And it can be done right. We're not going to completely downplay testosterone injections, but almost none of them are doing it correctly because the women are still getting what's called supra-physiologic dosing. So just really high, well beyond whatever our physiology had. So the problem with pellets too is you can't take them out. So if you're someone who has an adverse reaction, bummer for you for the next 3 to 4 months, because you're going to have to live with that. You also can't modify the dose. Maria and I have been doing this a long time, and there's times where we're like, gosh, I'm just not feeling great. We can call up our doctor and say, can next month we change things? And they can change things. With the pellet, that's not going to happen. Similarly, with the testosterone injections, it's kind of, think of it like any injection. It's a bolus, right? It comes in and then it's going to slowly decline. So rather than having kind of a 3 to 4 month you're stuck with it presentation, it might be a week that you're stuck with it. But that can be enough for some women to suddenly lose a third of their hair. So they're very potent hormones. We have all this respect for them until we suddenly turn them into supplements. And now we think that we can just kind of go hairy-carry with them. So that is kind of the way that the testosterone piece works. But estradiol, transdermal, so that could be creams, that could be patches, that could be gels in the UK, some sprays in the UK. Wonderful estradiol injections can work for many. And then progesterone is primarily creams or pills. And, the pills can be problematic for some because maybe they don't have good gut function. Maybe they have a progesterone intolerance. Maybe they're allergic to peanut oil. The standard Prometrium progesterone pill in the United States is suspended in peanut oil. So that's when women would probably pursue compounded options, which is just very individualized medicine. You can change the dyes, the additives, how much the concentration is, etc. So we're huge fans of compounding, and that's a piece that, definitely gets kind of brought up as controversial in the US because people will say, well, they're not FDA regulated. And it's like, well, that's actually not entirely true. Compounders are very highly regulated. The final product doesn't have an FDA stamp of approval on it, but every ingredient that went into that product does. And
but the
reality is
approved.
No,
the pellets aren't FDA approved. So
they're compounded as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to go slow. That's why I was like, no, I'm not doing a pellet because I don't know how it's going to affect me. I wanted to go slow. And it wasn't an overnight fix, but within months I felt just like, oh, there I am. I'm back. It was all good. But I just want all people to know that it's going to take time. It's not an overnight fix.
Yes.
But some people were asking questions about breast cancer. Watch the beginning. We'll post this right away. Watch the beginning. Great explanation on that, Gabby.
Yeah, in the beginning.
So Lori, want to hit yours?
This one was interesting. So DEXA scan showed some weakening of the bones. They told me to take vitamin D and calcium. I want to pipe in first on the nutrition side of that. Mm-hmm. So there's been studies on this, and it showed that if you're eating low protein, all the calcium supplements in the world will not make a difference in your bones.
And most calcify.
Your bones are actually a matrix of protein that's filled in with calcium. And so if you're not getting enough protein, it will not matter what you supplement. So getting enough protein, and for me in this situation, I don't, regardless of their height and size, shouldn't be eating less than like 100 grams of protein a day in that situation.
At least.
And if you're taller, more than.
I'm going to say vitamin K2 is much more important than calcium any day. And vitamin K2 is getting calcium into the bones.
It regulates calcium metabolism. It gets calcium where it's supposed to be in the bones. So that's a big help too.
Yeah.
And I will add to that.
Estradiol.
And I'll add to that, and I'm going to quote, because we are just lowly educators and health coaches, but I will quote Avram Blooming, who said vitamin D and calcium have no effect on a woman who's estrogen deficient. I'm probably messing up that quote, so it's not verbatim, but he, so he's a pro kind of hormone oncologist. So, yeah.
I mean,
and another reason to never go off hormones, maybe, right?
Absolutely.
Right. But I was going to say, to Craig's point too, because I know you guys are fans of this, because I'm in a couple of your Facebook groups. It's animal proteins that we need specifically.
Yeah.
And, there is now this push to plant proteins, and plant proteins actually increase something that hastens bone breakdown. There's a molecule that plant proteins end up being catabolic to bones. And a lot of women don't appreciate that. So they think they're eating all their beans and their, plant protein sources and whatnot, their pea protein, and they're going to be protecting their bones. But we hate to say it to you ladies, you're not. You need the animal protein.
Exactly. And a lot of the plants will come with compounds like oxalates, which bind to calcium and rob the body of it. So that's another thing to worry about.
Yeah. The other thing too is most people don't understand, like, our calcium is really tightly regulated in the body. Our blood calcium levels are constantly shifting in and out of the bones. You can't just take a supplement, dump calcium into the blood, and think it's going to get into the bones. Like Maria said, we need the K2, we need the D3. But the other problem is we actually need estradiol. Estradiol is the primary escort to get calcium into the bone mineral matrix. And so what happens, sadly, with a lot of women who are told, take your, what are those chocolate chews? I forget what were such big things about 10 years ago with the
my mom bought those for me in college.
Yes. I used to pop them all the time, Maria. Like, if we only knew what we don't know. But those calcium chews or any calcium supplementation without estradiol can end up laying the calcium down as plaque in your heart. And so a lot of women don't realize that they're actually impairing their heart health by taking calcium and not taking estradiol. So that's, and most women, you take estradiol, you don't even need to supplement with calcium, because your body has that metabolic homeostasis that it's always seeking with calcium exchange in the blood. It's going to do it for you.
Okay, you keep saying estradiol. What about estrone? Yes. Because I know they were really into adding estrone to my cream to help.
Estrone. Are you sure it's estrone?
Maybe estriol.
Estriol,
maybe. I have to go look at the cream, but they were I said, no, I just want the one that my ovaries make. And they said, no, this one is going to help protect with breast cancer or something.
Okay.
I was talking into it. So tell me what I should do.
Well, so it sounds, I highly doubt that you're taking estrone. I mean, yes, it can be done, and it has been done.
I'm going to look right now.
It's called, would be called Triest, TRI-EST. But what's much more common, and I suspect that you're probably taking, is Biest, BI-EST. And that would be estradiol and estriol. So estriol is made only largely when a woman is pregnant, because the placenta will produce it. And so this is theoretical, and there's many different things, but we'll just kind of talk about this right now. That's theoretical. So when a woman is pregnant, she's actually got a reduced immune system, and that's so she doesn't reject the genetic material of the father, right? So now what we're doing is we're taking women who are, not pregnant, who are older, and we're kind of creating this lowered immune milieu. We've also seen clinically that when a woman takes estradiol and estriol in a combination, whether it's a cream or a pill, it's usually a cream, the estriol, even though it is a weaker estrogen, and that's where that whole it's good to protect you against cancer because it's weaker, it actually seems to kind of sit on the estrogen receptor and bump the estradiol off. So we've seen high estriol and low estradiol in women on Biest. And then, not to mention, women using Biest can get early wins, feel better. It usually never lasts.
Yeah.
So you're saying
that
Biest could almost
lower your immune
system. Well, it could also make my overall estrogen look a little bit lower because it's kind of sitting on the receptor.
Your estradiol. And when we test, we really don't want to test in total. You can test something called total estrogens, and it won't break it out. So really what you want to do is you want to test estradiol, and we've seen estradiol of 15 to 30 on women on biased, and that's barely enough to even get symptom relief.
That's me. Okay. All right. We'll fix it. Thank you. I should pay you for your service.
No, but that's when we talk about estrogen receptors, I mean, we are really primarily talking about estradiol receptors. And the reality is estrone and estradiol kind of convert back and forth constantly in the body. So there's a belief in a lot of women like, oh, I don't want any estrone. It's like your body's going to make some anyway, and it actually will go back to being estradiol. It's just part of the metabolic process of the two hormones. The difference with estriol is that if estradiol converts into estriol, or we take estriol, it does not convert back to estradiol. And so knowing then that we're essentially supplementing you with the hormone of pregnancy and not the actual hormone of your metabolic health, that's the problem. And so some doctors will say, well, I'll change the percentages, because you'll see biased being 80% estriol, 20% estradiol. Then they'll say, okay, I'll make you 50-50. And as Maria just pointed out, it doesn't matter, because if you take the estriol, it sort of blocks the estradiol from sitting on that receptor, and you will end up predominantly with estriol.
You're brilliant.
Very interesting.
Someone's asking about if you have MTHFR. Do you find a difference with that?
It's not a problem. We can, we
agree. We agree. Most people have a version of that.
Yeah,
anyway.
totally.
Yeah, I mean, there is a methylation process to the metabolism of estrogen, but it's actually the COMT enzyme, not the MTHFR enzyme, that's more, directing that process.
Make myself feel useful, answer a couple of quick nutrition questions here. One is, I've been on carnivore for a year and weight loss has stalled, but I'm doing it for better health. One thing to consider is lowering your dietary fat a little bit, and as well as cutting dairy. Dairy is one of the things that it doesn't trigger satiety is the same as other fats and ingredients. And if you're eating just the fattiest cuts of meat all the time,
or putting a stick of butter on your steak,
or putting a stick of butter on your steak, or some of these things we see in this carnivore community, try substituting one of those ribeyes for a filet mignon, or a tenderloin.
Every breakfast is mine. I'll say
you'll see a difference.
Estriol, it is estriol.
Just estriol, or is there estradiol in there? Because that doesn't. Oh, okay. So you're unbiased.
So that's a bad one.
It's not.
We just want to get you on straight estradiol.
It's
okay.
It will become ineffective, most likely.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of experience with women unbiased.
Yeah, good to know.
If we have time, we can talk about receptors and give you a little bit more of a bias kind of.
It's up to you. I could talk about this all day. I think that people are just throwing questions out there. Can you expand, please?
Like another.
We're good.
15 minutes.
Yeah, we're good.
And this kind of goes to the cancer thing as well. So we have several estrogen receptors, but we're going to talk about the two main ones. We have estrogen receptor alpha, estrogen receptor beta. And it's really fun way to remember them is the alpha receptor is the accelerator. It causes growth. And ladies and gentlemen, growth is not a bad thing. Okay, everyone thinks estrogen growth, cancer. You need estrogen alpha to repair things in the body. So there's that. Then we have estrogen receptor beta. Beta think brakes. That puts the dampening effect on the growth. Okay, so here's the thing. Estriol largely only signals the beta receptor. Estradiol signals equally at the alpha and the beta receptor. So estradiol gives you this beautiful, nice, balanced effect at the level of the receptor. Estriol does not. But again, because it signals the beta receptor, which is controlled growth, doctors and people think, well, not all doctors, but some think, well, it's much more cancer protective. That's really not true. It's theoretical. It's something that they've come up with. It's really not supported in science literature at all. So that's just another reason why we don't like like biased. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I don't know if you did or someone did, about, their estrogen was high. And we just did this with a client this morning, is we said, grab your lab report and look at the ranges that they list, right? So if you're a 50-some-year-old woman and let's say you got an estradiol of 50, you will literally be flagged high when in reality, you're not even getting bone remodeling at that level. And the reason is because there's a little range over to the side that says postmenopausal. And what they're saying is it's normal for a postmenopausal woman to be within these ranges. That doesn't mean it's optimal, right? And so what we try and point women is look at the ranges above where they're looking at a premenopausal woman in different phases, you know, the follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase, as well as pregnancy. Those levels go anywhere up to 500 or into the many thousands. And so when women get this notion that, well, I'm kind of scared of estrogen, it might cause cancer. If you've ever been pregnant, you had estradiol levels in the like tens of thousands. We're not coming out of pregnancy riddled with cancer, ladies. So it's not the estradiol that's the problem. You know, cancer is just multifaceted. We can't blame it on one hormone. Are there cancers in which they are stimulated by estrogen? Sure, but the estrogen didn't cause the cancer. It's just as Maria said, the estrogen receptor growth, you know, can help that cancer kind of blossom. It's not going to cause it though to begin with. So we always, you know, kind of caution women on don't look at lab values and their flags as normal because they're not optimal. It's kind of like the RDA you guys talk about with protein, right? The RDA is just to prevent, you know, disease process from occurring. That sure as heck is far from the optimal amount. I mean, Maria, you'd probably be eating on the RDA at your height and weight, I'm guessing like 40 grams of protein if you followed the RDA, right? So
put a one in front of it.
With hormones. Yeah, exactly. But it's the same with hormones, right? Is that those ranges that we see are truly just what's the conventional kind of range for these phases of life. And if you're a perimenopausal or postmenopausal woman, normal is low estrogen. That doesn't mean it's optimal.
Well, labs in general, when I look at labs around, you know, the United States, labs are doing the median. And who's going to get labs? Right. People that aren't feeling well or sick. So automatically that median is shifted totally off. And it's different all around the United States.
Different labs in different areas will have different averages.
Yeah, it's just the median. It doesn't mean optimal. Like, I love that word that you said, optimal. Yeah. We have a question here. I'm 66. Oh, you go over it.
Yeah. Well, this one was interesting as well. It's so what you see so often is the doctor said HRT caused cancer. So, you know, this is 20 years ago, but there's still quite a bit of that today.
Yeah. And not to defend her doctor entirely, but it is 2024. 20 years ago, it was 2004. They had just stopped the WHI study. And so that was the belief then. You know, unfortunately, any doctor saying that today needs to maybe retire. But
yeah, get some new education going. Here's one more I'll jump in on. I started carnivore diet at 51, lots of perimenopausal symptoms 3 years ago. All symptoms at the time went away. Now my period stopped since December and all symptoms are coming back. A couple things on that. Number one, you know, all your sex hormones are made from cholesterol. So possibly she was increasing her dietary cholesterol intake and that was providing some, you know, boost in hormones for a period of time, but that's not going to stop the natural process. And one thing I want to say for sure is that, you know, if there's carnivore influencers or whatever out there saying that, you know, just eat carnivore will fix all your problems. If you have a food-based problem like eczema, let's say you have eczema and it's being triggered by food, it's being triggered by dairy or by gluten. If you cut that food out, you can completely eradicate that. Yes, that's true.
But you're still going to go into menopause.
You're still going to go into menopause.
Even if you're a carnivore, people.
You can still have something like I do, which was triggered by Lyme and chronic mold, which eating carnivore can help with those symptoms, but it's not addressing the root cause.
Yeah, we get really frustrated because people are like, Craig, just eat, you know, level 1 carnivore. He's like, dude, I've been doing that for 7 years. It makes the symptoms better, but it's never going to take Lyme disease
and it's
away.
never going to fix the mold issues. It's never going to fix those other root causes.
Can you tell that we're a little passionate about that?
No, but you know what, the point that you guys are making and you don't even realize you're making it, and it's so powerful, is that this also applies to hormones. Hormones, we like to say, are magic, but they are not a magic pill. And so what we see is too often women will be like, oh, it's my hormones are the problem. And they run to someone and seek out HRT without addressing their gut, without addressing their diet, without addressing their lifestyle, without addressing their stress, without addressing their environment. You will not solve those problems with hormones, period. So as much as Maria and I are like, we'll take our hormones to the grave, thank you very much. we are also every single day waking up and making deliberate, intentional choices to support our health with respect to our food and our movement and our sleep and everything else. So that's the piece, is like, that woman is showing that, you know, she might have had some metabolic derangement that carnivore really took care of and really helped with a lot of those symptoms. And that's important. But now we still need to address the imperative of the loss of hormones. And it's the, you know, Maria and I like to say there's someone who loves to talk about fasting and just fast harder, fast longer, fast this. You don't need to, you know, take hormones at 43, just fast. And Maria and I always say, well, when you can show me that fasting lubricates a woman's vagina, we'll take it on. But until that
Kristin
happens,
loves to say that. I just gotta say that.
Plus, then, you know, especially if it's extended fasting, longer
lose
than
muscle
24
mass.
hours, you're losing muscle mass,
which is already sped up.
less places for glucose to go, and that whole snowball and
And it's
lower
already
BMR.
sped up with the menopause and stuff.
So-
So maybe
Yes.
we can just, you know, the last 5 minutes, I know you guys are on vacation too, maybe talk about diet. And I know we're on the same page, so just go.
Yeah, I mean, diet is huge. So I will just give you a quick little story. I met a woman just on Friday who was 72, who looked 80 to 82. And I always say health has a look, but it's not completely defined by looks. I mean, I think we present in a certain way when we're healthy, clear eyes, you know, not sallow skin, but you know, age will eventually catch up to all of us. And I was taken aback because her husband told me she has congestive heart failure, a blood clot in her lungs. And we discovered this like last month because she had pneumonia. And I also happen to know that, you know, she doesn't really eat well. And most likely, I probably could bet my life on it, she has not used HRT. But so then I compared her with my mom, who's 76 and a half. And again, is definitely feeling the, you know, I know that the lack of hormones is not helpful for my mom right now. But my mom, you know, eats real food, focuses on like grass-fed meat, gets out and walks every day with my dad. I mean, I think she kind of, you know, does the gym. I don't know exactly what she does, but like she has some healthy lifestyle things in place that makes my mom at 76 and a half healthier and more vital than this woman who I met at 72 with congestive heart failure who looks 82. So, I mean, these things are incredibly important. And, you know, having that high protein diet just gives us the best shot at maintaining our muscle mass as we age. And we all, you know, could talk about that until we're blue in the face. So,
yeah.
Animal
I mean, we're, you know,
yep.
yeah. And I so appreciate, because I, you know, I'm in your keto group and I see kind of the discussions that go on there and whatnot. And, you know, people do not need to be chasing fat. Women should not be chasing fat in this time of life. It's just way too dense in calories and satiety. They tend to undereat then, which is catabolic in of itself, and, you know, all those things. Yeah. And so we follow pretty much the same as you, which is, you know, 1 pound or 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. If, you know, you can get that. And if you can't, then look at your digestive function, look at your gut microbiome, right? Like, it's not that hard to eat 140, 150 grams of protein. But if you're struggling with it, you might have some leptin ghrelin issues. You might have some circadian rhythm issues. You might have some gut dysfunction issues. So don't blame it on the protein. Still make that your goal, please. please. Yeah. And then, you know, carbohydrates, I mean, we look at it as like, how muscled are you? How active are you? You know, those sorts of things. It can be anywhere from the women who want to retain some state of ketosis up to, you know, 150 grams a day of carbs, if that's working for you. But, you know, most of us really aren't needing to operate in that high, you know, carbohydrate space. And then we just always say fine tune with the fats, you know, use the fats to figure out kind of how am I feeling in with my calories? How is my satiety? How is my sleep? How's my performance in the gym? Things like that can obviously be hampered by low fat. So, you know, make the priority your protein and then, you know, learn from there. And I think too many women are kind of following some people who are like, look at my acai bowl, look at my, you know, oatmeal muffins, look at these things. Or they're following food plans. And one of the things that drives us nuts about meal plans is it doesn't teach a woman anything. You know, we've sort of disconnected our brain from our body. And so if we're subscribing to these people who are just providing us, you know, a 7-day meal plan to get someone kickstarted, absolutely great. But when we're relying on someone to tell us what to eat every day, we've lost that ability to connect how we feel with what choices we're making. And that we tell women all the time, focus on that. Don't worry about the scale. Don't worry about the scale. Doesn't even tell us anything about health. Let's be honest. But don't worry about those things first. Just try to get back an acquaintance with your body and figure out what feels good. And when women finally trust us on that actually eating more might lead to weight loss, under eating is so bad, they will call us and say, oh my gosh, I had, a filet for breakfast and I had salmon for lunch and I feel like my brain's on fire. And we're like, yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
I did have a filet for breakfast and I'm going to have mahi for lunch.
Well,
every day.
Prioritizing protein is so important, not only for all of those factors, but if you put 2 plates in front of anybody in nutrition or health space, and you say both have the same calories, but this one plate over here has way more vitamins and minerals than the other one. Which one's healthier for you? Well, everybody's going to say the one with more vitamins and minerals, right? But if you look at a plate of fat and protein's off the charts for vitamins and minerals, and fat has very little. Fat's a great energy source, but it's not going to supply the body with those vitamins and minerals.
Protein's not a great energy source. You have to either pick carbs or fat, and we always lean towards more on the fat side because carbohydrates, usually gets people down the rabbit hole of cravings. But anyway, I want to, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You guys are on vacation, so where can people find you? And do you do online consultations with people?
Yeah, so the best place for them to find us is Instagram, Wise and Well. So they just type that up. Both of our pictures will come up. And then, the way that we prefer to work with women, and pretty much the only way at this point, although we have a few new things coming down the pike, but they're not quite ready yet, is a 6-month program, because everything we just want to teach them about HRT. We want to give them agency before, and we really kind of want to caution them not to jump into HRT. We're the biggest fangirls, but we realize it takes some learning. There are occasionally some side effects that have to be dealt with, but and if you get these side effects and you give up, have you ditched all the potential benefits? So we teach on all of these things, work on your nutrition, your gut health. The 6-month program will connect you with a practitioner that we like, that's matched you to your goals for your HRT. So that's the primary way we work with women.
And the predominant education is done in 8 weeks. It's not like you're waiting the whole 6 months. Most women are kind of getting their referral around the 8 to 10 week mark if they want one. And I would say it's a lot like what I see with you guys is, when I see new people come into your group, they just want to know the what. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. And the folks who serve as your moderators and your kind of long-term followers are able to tell the why. And so that's what we're trying to get women to understand is they need to know what their cycle represented before they were perimenopausal. They need to understand the relevance of those hormones, their rhythms, their kind of relative peaks and how they cycle back and forth. Because if they understand the why of what was happening and keeping us healthy when we were younger, they will much more easily then understand why when we lose those cycles, peaks, and rhythms, we start to see things fall. And then they will understand why we would want to consider restoring them. And so it's trying to bring women along that arc of education is really our goal, because we could make a ton of money if we just told women what to do. Right? But that's not necessarily going to get great outcomes for women, because they need to understand why in order to enable change, in order to adopt new habits and to kind of take on the responsibility of their body as they go forward. So that's, why I don't want people to hear, oh my God, 6 months. It's like you have our support for 6 months, but the education is really about 8 weeks long. And then we're there to kind of walk alongside you. Maria and I are moms to 7 boys, so we relate to you and your boys. And we are kind of toughies, to be honest. I mean, we're not going to hold your hand in that we're going to enable excuses and do things for you. But we want to essentially teach you, empower you, give you agency, and then we're here for you. So that's kind of how we work with women.
And
awesome.
I mean, can I announce you do have a book coming this fall? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Sorry. I mean, we have some exciting news coming this fall.
It's fine.
Keep in touch.
No, we're excited.
That's really
And
important, because you guys could have just given us 10 times more the information, if we kept you here for hours. But I just love that I will be able to buy a book this fall. So we're just exciting. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Well, we'd love to get you a copy and do something fun for your community when we get closer, if you'd like that.
I'll buy a copy. I'll be the first one to buy it. So thank you, Maria and Kristin. We really appreciate your time, and enjoy Florida, right? Kristin?
Yeah, I'm in Florida. Yep.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching, and you can find all the links.
Thank you guys.
This video.
Bye everyone.